Okay, I'm calling this the final margin call ever, but it's not really technically what I'm referring to. It's not really a margin call. It's more like a collapse of credit, and suddenly they're going to call in all of the loans worldwide are going to be called in, and because there's going to be no bid, nobody out there to buy anything, the whole system's going to collapse in on itself. And this is what I call the deflationary spike event, because it's going to be all the markets, everything, making a spike signal straight down, just spike, like driving it right into the ground. It's going to go down like that. Everything, commodities, everything is going to go down. In the panic, gold and silver and might not go down quite as bad as everything else, because they are money. But money itself too is what's going to be going up. Everything else, real estate, I mean, it's just going to, the bottom's going to drop out of everything, and the government's going to have to rush in to stop this. What this is going to be is going to be the last margin call, and I'm calling it a margin call because it's going to be a move that's so sudden, so swift. Everything's going to start to lock up. All credit's going to start to lock up, and everybody's going to try to get out of, and they're going to call in their debts. It's all going to be called. They're not going to. Nobody's going to extend any more credit. It's going to be a meltdown, an entire meltdown of the system. This is what's coming. Now, this is what started to happen in 2008, and they were able to stop it before it completed its cycle. They call it a death spiral, because when it completes its cycle, it basically destroys everything. That's why they couldn't let it complete its cycle, and that's why they can't let this one complete its cycle. But this one is going to be exponentially larger than 2008. If 2008 was say it was an earthquake, 2008 would have been a 6 on the Richter scale. This one's going to be a 9.8. This is going to be much more massive than 2008. And so, to understand what a margin call really is, for a lot of you out there that don't know what a margin call is, risk is the engine of the stock market. Without risk, there would be no way to make money as your stock prices rise. Of course, the same risk that inflates stock prices one day can deflate them the next. For the average stock market investor, the normal risk of a market is enough to satisfy their financial goals without keeping them up at night. But for high-rolling investors who want to make large amounts of money quickly, fully understand the serious risks involved, nothing beats buying on margin. Buying on margin is borrowing money from your stockbroker to buy a stock. Essentially, it's a loan from your broker. Your broker can loan you up to 50% of the price of the stock. So, if the stock price is $100,000, you'll only have to pay $50,000, and your broker will cover the other $50,000. If the stock price increases to $125,000, you make 50% return on your investment. So, see, I'm using this term, margin call, to describe this credit expansion. But in fact, they're not just borrowing 50% on what they own. They're borrowing far more in this credit expansion. This is what's fueled this credit expansion. People are so far in debt right now, it's unbelievable, and that's why I'm calling it a margin call. I have to have a name for this credit contraction that's coming. It's a huge contraction of the system. And margin call is basically the best name that you can use for it. Another name I use for it is this deflationary spike event, because everything is going to spike downwards. So, I'll give you an example for the banks themselves, how this is going to work on the banks. Is when a bank lends money out, they have a money creation tool that's called fractional reserve borrowing. They can lend out 10 times as much money as they have in reserve at the bank. And now, with some of the new rules that they have, they can lend out far more than that even, and they only have to keep back a very small percentage of money for the amount of money that they lend out. Now, this makes it so that if everybody were to rush to the bank and say, hey, you know, we want our cash, It's not there. Not even 1/10 of it's there. In fact, they did a study quite recently, and they found that if everybody in the world were to run into the bank right now, right this minute, and want their money, you would get, now, I'm going to give you the number, what you'd get for each dollar. Do you think that you would get 10 cents on a dollar? No, less. Do you think that you'd get 5 cents on each of your dollars? No, less. If everybody in the world ran into the banks right now and wanted their money, would you even get 3 cents on the dollar? No, less. 4 cents on the dollar? No, less. Less than 2 cents? Yes, less than 2 cents. Less than a penny on the dollar? Yes. You would get 0.6 of 1 penny. That's just slightly over a half a penny for every one of your dollars you have in the bank. If everybody ran into the bank right now to get wanted their money. And most people think that their money is in the bank. They say, hey, my money's in the bank. They picture in their mind their money sitting in a bank vault back there, in the vault. And in fact, this is why the banks keep these vaults for the most part right now, is because, for one thing, they're making money on them by lending out safety deposit boxes. And the second thing is they don't really need them. They could get by with just a small safe at the bank. It makes for looks. It really helps to keep the people in a psychological viewpoint that it's like the magic that they perform, like the old snake charmers and the snake oil salesmen used to perform magic to keep the crowd allured, you know, so the crowd thought there was something to the snake oil. And this is why the bankers don't want you to look at their screen, first off. You ever go to the teller window, they kind of keep their screen to themselves. Once in a while, you might get a teller who will swing their screen around and show you what's on their screen, but not very often. Most times, they keep that screen to themselves. And the reason why is you have the illusion that your money is real within the system, that you can actually physically, tangibly put your fingers on it. And in fact, if you go in and say, I want to make a withdrawal from the bank, they will give you cash. But what they're giving you is the share of cash that is for everyone. They're giving you a small share of the cash that's going to cover the entire bank. I dare say, if you were to have a millionaire, and if he were to go out tomorrow morning and set up 10 different accounts in 10 different banks in your city. Now, I'm just making this up right now, but it's true. This was what would really happen. If you had a millionaire, and say he only had, now that's not a very rich person, it's just a millionaire, he's got $1 million, right? But if he were to set up 10 accounts in your city at 10 different banks, and if he were to go in and demand $100,000 in each one of his accounts at 10 different banks, if he were to go in and demand that $100,000 from each of the banks, first off, just for argument's sake, they would tell him no. This is what would happen in real life is they would say, no, you can't have your money. But let's just say, for argument's sake, that they couldn't tell him no, that they'd have to give him their money, the money, the $100,000. They would be scrapping around. They would be like, clean out their vault. They would clean out their vault. There'd probably be maybe 15 or 20,000 in their vault. They'd clean that out, and they'd still be like $70,000 short. And they would be calling up the company that delivers money, you know, to bring out a truck. And they'd tell him to wait right here, and he'd have to wait there for like a half an hour, and they'd bring out a Brinks truck. And they'd probably be able to get another $50,000 off the Brinks truck. And they would be scrounging to try to get money. And as soon as he left there, if he went to the next bank and took out $100,000, he would drain the entire city of money. There wouldn't be any money left. There wouldn't be any cash left for the entire city. And that's just $1 million, right? In fact, the real truth of the matter is, in the entire world, there's only 1.4 trillion in actual cash that's in existence for the entire world. All the rest is digital. And that digital money does not exist. It doesn't exist in the real world, no more than Bitcoin. In fact, Bitcoin is more tangible and exists more. Bitcoin is more able to be kept on the internet better and more safely and more securely than that money that you got in the bank, because it doesn't really exist in truth. As cash, it doesn't really exist. It exists only to the fact that they do keep enough cash on hand to satisfy people that come in and want to make withdrawals from the bank right now at this particular time. So now I was going to get back to how this actually works and why this margin call would be so devastating to the banks. First off, you have to understand how the banks make money through the process of fractional reserve banking. They only have one tool that can make money. It's kind of like if you understand anything about pumps and the way water moves. There's a thing called a valve that they put on things, and sometimes there's a thing called a one-way valve, so the water can only flow in one direction. If the water tries to go back this way, the valve stops it. And this is the way with the banks. They have one money creation tool that works in one direction only. Loans. When they loan a loan out, they can create the money for that loan. So if a person's borrowing from them, they just basically write it down on their ledger, which involves pushing some numbers on their computer. So say you want to borrow 100,000. They just type 100,000 into the computer, and now that money exists. And they'll give you, if you want to take some out, or you want to write off, say you want to pay somebody, now you can pay them from that 100,000 that they just lent you. And that 100,000 springs into existence. And that's their money creation tool. It works in one direction. It works as in loans. But what happens now is immediately when they create that $100,000 loan, what they do, and they write it on their books, now it's a credit to the bank. They accept that as being part of their bank capital. And they have different tiers of capital. Say they have like Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3, and so on. Different types of capital in the bank. And those loans are part of their capital. Now, what happens is that's a credit to the bank. So whenever you hear these banks say, oh, we just made $5 billion this year, our bank made $5 billion, what you should actually be hearing is that bank made $5 billion worth of loans and created that money from nothing. That's their profit for that year. Now, all's well and good, as long as those people are paying those loans back. The bank stays fat and happy. But what happens when the loans go down and they're not paying them? Well, at first, what the bank does is they still keep those loans on their book as a credit, even though the guy's not paying them. It has to be made absolutely official that they're never going to get that money. Even when it's obvious, completely obvious that they're never going to get that money, they'll still keep it on their books as a credit. And now, see, this is what's happening over in Europe right now. Countries like Greece that can obviously never pay their loan back, right? But these banks that lent them that loan are still keeping it as a credit on their books. And it's such a big credit that if that credit was taken off of their books, they would go bankrupt too. But as long as they can keep that credit on their books, then they're fine. And so what they've been doing is they've been actually giving Greece the money. Greece will owe like $10 billion they'll owe back. And they'll give Greece $10 more billion, and then they'll say, now, Greece, you pay us back. And then Greece hands it back to them. And then basically they say, okay, you've just made a payment on your loan. Oh, if you could get, and just think, if you could get your credit company or whatever to do that for you, you could basically go forever. You know, you could, say your house payment's $2,000. You know, the bank could say, here's the $2,000, now give us the $2,000 back, and now you've just made a payment on your loan. Wouldn't that be nice? But see, the only reason why they're doing this for countries like Greece is because if they were to go ahead and make it official, then suddenly that credit that's on the bank would become a debt on the bank, and then they would have to make good for it. And because their money creation tool does not work that way, I mean, they cannot just arbitrarily create any amount of money they want to pay off their own debts. They can't do that. Suddenly, they got a big black hole that they can't fix in their bank. A big black hole of money that there's no filling it. Right? If somebody big goes under, that they've made loans out to. like a country, like Greece. And this is why they practically begged Greece not to give up on their debt, because they would take the whole system down, because they would start a chain reaction of margin calls. Not really margin calls, but a collapsing system, a chain reaction of everything. See, what people think what they have is worth. Like, say if a guy has a farm, you know, and a car. Say he says, my car's worth $10,000 and my farm's worth $100,000. Right? And the bank comes along and they say, yes! They say, we're going to extend you credit on your farm for $100,000. You know, and he says, my farm's worth $100,000. And the bank extends him credit for $100,000 and make him a loan, you know? That's all well and fine until the system folds down and there's no buyers out there. Then suddenly that $100,000, he's out there trying to sell it for half. And there's still no buyers. $50,000. Take it, $50,000. And then he drops the price down $25,000. There's still no buyers. It can get this bad. $10,000 and there's still no buyers. Because that's what happens when this margin call occurs. Everything shrinks. Now at a certain point, when the system actually starts to lock up during this margin call or this debt call or this collapse in credit, the government actually has to step in. Now, see, the government is what can save these banks that are collapsing. Because the government then can go in and they can take loans out from the Federal Reserve to repair this, to inject liquidity back into the system. Now, see, what the Federal Reserve is doing right now is they're withdrawing all of this liquidity out of the system by tightening. They're only going to withdraw a certain amount of liquidity out of this system. Then suddenly they're going to get this enormous margin call or this drying up. See, right now, there's still liquidity floating around in the system, but not much. Not near as much as there was, say, a year ago. It's drying up fast. It's going to hit a certain point, and none of us really know exactly what that point is, but we all of us who are in the know that this is what's going to cause it, is the drying up of liquidity. And it's only going to go so far before all of a sudden that this event is triggered. Probably with a stock market crash. Or it could be the bond market. Not exactly sure. But we do know that the liquidity can only dry up so far before suddenly. This is an event that happens like it's an event that happens so quickly that you don't see it coming. You wake up one morning and there it is. It's right in front of your nose. It's actually, you're in it and it's happening. And this is what's coming. And I'll call it the margin call. Because it's going to be the final margin call, because it's going to be so severe that what's going to happen is after they fix all of this and after things return to normalcy, they're going to put controls in. Very strict financial controls into the banking sector and things like that next time around, so that this won't happen again, and it's going to be a long time probably before this will ever happen again, because it's going to be so severe, this event. It's going to be worse than the Great Depression, and after the Great Depression they put rules in place that lasted a long time, banking rules and things, and a Glass-Steagall they put in, and it lasted ages before it was finally taken out. I think it was taken out during the Reagan administration. Rules that they put in all the way back, I think, around 1930-something, you know, to keep the banking system from having these problems. And they've taken out these rules so that they could leverage up the system. And believe me, they have leveraged up the system. They've levered it up to the point now where when this delevers, when this whole thing comes down, and it's going to come down rather suddenly, it's going to leave people in shock and in awe. Now, I've set up my channel not an awful long time ago, around the start of this year, because I sensed that we were getting too close, and there was I had an urgency that this event is coming, and I was setting up my channel particularly for this particular event. I know I cover an awful lot of other news topics, but my primary focus of my channel is the great event that's coming. Just like some other channels, like the X22 Report, you know, which is a great channel out there run by Dave. He focuses on this event too, the up-and-coming crisis that's coming. And there's an awful lot of people out there who know that this event is coming. There's no way around it. It's mathematically baked into the cake at this point. It has to occur. The big question is, when is it actually going to really strike? I know that a lot of people say we're in it right now, but that's true and it isn't true. I mean, we have been slowly sliding down the hill, but we haven't fallen over the cliff, so to speak. So, when this margin call occurs, you've got to understand first off that they're going to run to the dollar first, and they're going to run to the fiat currencies, because this is where they know to go. But ultimately, what's going to happen is when the government repairs this margin call, or tries to repair it, they're going to use fiat currencies to repair it with. And this means creating tremendous amounts of liquidity. And when they do that, they're going to destroy the value of the liquidity. So first we're going to move in one direction. The direction of there being no buyers out there. All items going down in price in compared to cash. And then what's going to happen is then when the government comes to the rescue and they create unlimited amounts of liquidity or cash, then it's going to move in the opposite direction. The price is going up in everything. So it's just going to be like you're going to run one direction, and then you're going to run directly in the opposite direction. Almost like if a stadium was on fire, and they tell everybody, run this way to the exits. You know? And then all the crowd's running this way. And then all of a sudden the guy stops for a minute and says, hey, just wait a minute, those exits are blocked. Sorry! Those exits are blocked. By my mistake, run that way. That's what it's going to be like. See? And Mike Maloney, you know, he said this is a roller coaster crash, meaning that the roller coaster, you know, it goes down like this, and then it swings around and goes up. It changes direction. This whole thing's going to change direction. And actually what it is it's for the people who get nervous and sell out for cash at the bottom of this. When the thing is, when the government's ready to come in and create tremendous amounts of cash and make cash practically worthless, there's going to be people that are selling out for cash, because the first direction it's going to go is because liquidity's been drying up, and there's ample of everything. People have overstocked. Take a look at these places, these car lots and stuff. They've brought in all kinds of excess inventory. Tons and tons of excess inventory. But cash has been drying up. This is why the inventory is all sitting on the lots. Take a look at houses. They're out there building houses right now. All those houses are going to sit there empty when this cash crunch hits. See? So everything's going to move in one direction, and then it's going to move in the opposite direction. And so this is one of the things that makes it tricky. So a lot of you might be thinking to yourself right now, you're thinking to yourself, hey, I'm going to get into cash, because when the margin call comes, and when the liquidity all dries up, I'm going to be able to get tremendous deals on everything. Well, I'll tell you what, this might be true. You might be able to get some good deals for a very short period of time on certain items. Right? Don't count on getting gold and silver, though, as those items. But you might be able to get a good deal on a car or something like that. Or on a house or something, on certain things. You might be able to get a good deal, especially if this deflationary spike event lasts a fairly long period of time. I don't know how long it's going to last. I think it's going to be very quick. I can't see it lasting more than, say, 3 months maximum. Because if it goes on too long, it'll destroy the entire system, and the government cannot let that happen. It's really probably only going to last a couple weeks, 2 or 3 weeks, really. But when it's on, you're going to see prices not falling, prices in free fall on everything, and money just drying up. Nobody will have any money. Seriously, nobody will have any money. And these deflationist guys, Guys like Harry Dent, guys like, can't think of his name right now, but there's a number of them. You know who they are. They're going to be saying, we told you so. We told you this was coming when it's on. But there's one thing that they're missing, is the reaction that's going to come to this event from the government. They can be all talk right now, and there's a lot of talk that they won't do anything. You watch them. Watch them squeal like pigs. What is the reaction going to be if you were to take... You could say, look at that pig down there, right? You could say, that pig's not going to react. And you take a pointed stick and you stick that pig with a pointed stick, and that pig's going to squeal. And that's the way with the government. When they get poked with the pointed stick, they're going to squeal. They're going to do what they did last time. Take a look at Henry Paulson. Look what he did during the last financial crisis. And they all ran in and created tremendous amounts of liquidity. And they just dumped it into the system, wholesale. They asked Ben Bernanke, where did all the money go? And he wouldn't tell anybody. It was hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars. This time, it's going to be way bigger. Way bigger. It's going to make that look small. You know? And they're already... I'm going to tell you what about them. They're a cunning bunch. They already know what I'm talking about is going to happen. They already know it. And that's why they're getting things moved and positioned already for things like the buzzwords that they're putting into the system right now. Things like tax rebate checks and buzzwords like guaranteed income for all. You know, the guaranteed income and stuff like that. Because it's these programs that they're going to instate when this thing hits. These are Keynesian programs. These are all Keynesian programs, because that's what these people are. They're Keynesians. They believe that if they can just keep pumping enough money into the system that they can make all the world rich and happy, and nobody will ever need to work again. All they need to do is just money creation, endless money creation, and that they can make the whole world, nobody will need to work, nobody will need to do anything. They won't even need a farm or anything. They're like the young man is trying to fly by lifting himself by his bootstraps. For some reason, it doesn't work that way. You just can't make unlimited amounts of money and dump it into the system and expect everything to be hunky-dory. You know, and this is what Keynesians think that they can do. They think that somehow that they can just create ample amounts of money and dump it into the system, and everything's going to be great. It's not going to be great. They're going to destroy the currency itself. And this is the next stage. But, you know, old Keynes, you know what he said in the end? He knew about this. He knew that this was actually a giant Ponzi scheme. That's what it is. Keynesian economics is run on a Ponzi scheme. And he knew that. And he knew in the end it gets so big, exponentially big, that in the end it collapses itself. And they pinned him down and got him to say what the end result is of all of this. And he says, well, you're all dead anyway. He says. In other words, when you get to the end of the game, when the game folds in on itself, he says, well, you're all dead anyway. You know? I mean, that's not an answer. That's not economics. And when this thing folds in on itself, in the end, and believe me, it will, you know, if not in this margin call, the one after that, because when they create this margin call, they're going to put in another, they're going to do like they did in 2008. Basically, that was one of these exact same events, but this one's going to be bigger. By creating liquidity, they were able to push it off, but they created an awful lot of inflation. Do you see how prices of things go back to 2008, go back to 2007, and take a look at prices on everything. Now take a look at prices now. They've destroyed basically half of the value of your dollar since 2008 till now. How much percentage of the dollar are they going to destroy in this next pulse? Maybe they won't destroy 100%. Maybe it will not cause a hyperinflation. In fact, there's a strong possibility that it won't cause a hyperinflation. That what it will cause is inflation, but tremendously bad inflation. Much worse than we've ever experienced before. Something in the order of maybe 25% per year inflation. That's not hyperinflation. But it's the kind of inflation that will still destroy savers. If you're losing 25% of your money every year that's in the bank, it's going to destroy your savers. What the point is, it's saving money. You know? And so, in the end, what that would lead to, if that happens and they pump tons of liquidity in the system and somehow they're able to manage to bring the system back and keep the system running for a few more years, you're going to then be heading toward another one of these events yet. Maybe 10 years from now after this one. So this one will occur. This one will be 10 times worse than 2008. And then what would happen is you would go for another 10 years and then you would have another one. But the next one would be sooner or later, they will end up in the end actually completely and utterly destroying the value of the paper currencies. In these pulses. I'll call them a pulse. It's almost like, you know, how a quasar goes pulse, 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 pulse. Or your heart goes beat, beat, beat. This is like that. It's a pulse. It's coming in pulses. 2008 was a pulse, and what we're getting ready to hit right now is another pulse in this thing. So listen, thank you guys for listening. Like and subscribe, and we'll catch you in the next article. Bye.